whatever I can do. And here's he.
I am asking everybody to boycott the football game. Do you believe in your country? Do you believe in the Star Spangled Banner? If you don't stand up for it now, you won't have it in the future.
Do you just hear, if you don't stand up for it now, you're going to not have it in the future. We've been saying this. We've been talking about this. And it's true. It's just, if we allow these things to happen, then it's not going to be such a big deal. But he makes a very relevant point, and he goes on. So please smile.
If you don't like being in this country, get out of this country.
Wow. If you don't like this country, get out of the country. I've been saying that too. He's a smart guy. He must be listening to the show.
We boycott them, and we hit them in the pocketbook where it hits them. Before long, we'll have them on both their knees.
Wow. We boycott them. We hit them in the pocketbook. And before long, we'll have them off their knees. They'll be standing. And guess what? They are standing. Increasingly. Oh, there's people that don't like it. Tough. It's just not the platform. It's not the place to be able to protest. And I believe that there are players that believe that there is a cause, and that's why they are doing it. I have listeners on both sides that listen to the show. We would not live up to our name if we did not address everything, and from both sides and from both perspectives. There are injustices in the legal system. There are people that get a raw deal where they get too much time. But I've seen it where people don't get enough time, depending on the county, depending on the state, depending on the day of the month. But I've seen this happen exponentially. Now, people will say, in crime statistics, when you look around, you'll see, with those that are in the penitentiary, how many, when you have the breakdown and you look at African Americans or you look at minorities and you look at the breakdown, there is more African Americans that are imprisoned in this country than any other race. It is true. But if you saw the Shawshank Redemption, did you not hear what they said? You know, Andy Dufresne, he had to find out very quickly, his character, that everybody in prison, they're not guilty. Not one of them. No, they got the deal. They got a bad lawyer. They ended up getting, if they had a good lawyer, they wouldn't have, because we're not guilty. Of course, everybody's guilty. Of course, there are a large majority of people, we later learned because of DNA and forensics, that, got a raw deal. Then now their cases go back and they find out, wait a second, due to DNA evidence, it wasn't your blood, it wasn't your semen, whatever, and you get out of prison, and that's a beautiful thing. There are injustices, and luckily there has been a lot of great organizations that have helped many people that have been wrongfully imprisoned or have gotten way too much time because the PD really didn't fight for them, and where there was a judge that just threw the book at them. But there's a lot of people in prison that got into prison because they broke the law. Plain and simple. I mean, you could get into semantics, you get into talking about marijuana and alcohol-related incidences and things like that, where people, well, I only had a dime bag and I only had this and that. It's kind of illegal in most states still. And federally speaking, they have not lifted that ban. It's still, you could be arrested by federal agents for having marijuana anywhere, even in California. Even though the state has theirs, the feds still could lock you up. Personally speaking, my deal with marijuana, if people need to smoke it because of medicinal purposes, or it mellows them out because they're loose cannon, let them smoke it. Just don't do it on my time. Don't come into work stoned out of your mind. And I hope to God you're not stoned too badly in traffic. We don't hear many people, getting pulled over for being stoned, but I'm sure it happens. I'm sure it happens. But more people do die, and statistically speaking, if you got to look at numbers and crime stats, alcohol-related fatalities, definitely way up there. And, that's a legal drug, just available everywhere. So, fight for something that could make a difference and maybe limit, take the keys away. It always makes me wonder, you think everybody that goes to a bar actually takes an Uber? It should be like mandatory. If you didn't come with somebody, you take an Uber. You Uber to the bar, Uber back. Wouldn't it be just so much easier? That would be make sense legislation. Seriously, I would be for it. If you plan on going to get sauced, don't be getting into the vehicle. Unless, I stay 2 hours afterwards and have coffee and I sober up before I get on the, Seriously, you know people that do that? There's people ended up telling me, people I've met on radio, that they've driven from a bar and didn't even remember them driving themselves home. But they're really good at driving when they're drunk. Not a very cool thing. I learn of DUIs constantly here in the Tampa Bay area. It breaks my heart. People driving the wrong way on I-4 or I-275 here in the Bay Area, and open up a newspaper, turn on Bay News 9 or Channel 8 or whatever in the morning, and I hear this stuff, and I think, God, really? It's just not worth it. You think people would be smarter, but they're not. But by the way, big kudos to this guy who flew this banner. I don't know how much that cost him, but that was a big amount of cash for Kurt Schelling for his banner that he flew over Jacksonville. He was telling his story to WFOX and WJAX in Jacksonville about all of this. And, he said he wanted to do it peacefully, but he made a point. Everybody got to see the boycott, the Jags and the NFL over, and it's really, really big. You got to look it up online. Really, really cool how the American flag's attached to the banner. It says, "Be American, period, boycott the Jags and the NFL." And everybody knows the Jags in London, they were overseas, and actually they knelt over there. So it's even overseas that people are doing this. And I mean, it's bad enough that you're over here and our but out of country representing us, and then you do that. My goodness, we're not a perfect country by any means, but God, we've come such a long way. You're African American. You're not a slave, okay? You get paid millions of dollars, and not everybody gets that opportunity. Millions of dollars. More African Americans than any time in history are millionaires. And there's more African American millionaires than any other time in history. Did you know that? More millionaires. Get out and mentor kids. Get out and mentor young people. Encourage, inspire them to do better. Tell them what you did. Help them with a scholarship. Get somebody in college. Find somebody, inspire them to get them on the field. Do things like that. That'll have more weight than any of this nonsense that you've been doing on the fields. And then disrespecting our flag, where nothing good comes out of that. Nothing at all. Help somebody else. You get people ruffled up over that. You get poor military guys that come back with PTSD and no limbs. And what is that one guy that's running in all those cities? His name eclipses me now, but running for those that can't. And he's running with two stumps, if you will, prosthesis, attached, but he's running every single day, city after city, city after city, doing that. And then he sees this kind of stuff going on. I mean, it's unnecessary. Luckily, it's not all players. When you see some of the images from past games where some do stand, but they got their hands on the shoulders of those that are kneeling. But they went out. It wasn't all, but just about, the whole teams. But that's going to change, folks. It's already changing. We see it. It's going to happen, not just in Dallas, it'll be all over the country. And then they'll have to go on to something else, and it'll be another story. But Colin Kaepernick, by the way, he's got one of these celebrity attorneys and has hired him because he feels there's collusion, because none of the NFL teams, none, wants to hire him. Nobody wants to take him back. They don't want him. And why? Because he's a troublemaker. And believe me, they weigh out many different things when they choose a player. He's a distraction. He's controversial. And they weigh out all those variations, then skill and all these things. He's more of a liability, more of an embarrassment. They don't want him. They don't want him. He says, if I go back, if they afford me, if they allow me to go back on the field, I promise, Colin Kaepernick says, I will stand. But even after saying this for the last 3 weeks, still, nobody wants him. And he was the guy who started all of it. Man, karma's bad, isn't it? So he thinks, in his mind, Donald Trump did this. To every single manager, every single team in the United States, Donald Trump has power, don't get me wrong. He didn't call every single manager of every single team. But what he did do was he brought attention to millions of veterans, and they saw it. He just illuminated it. They saw it on television. They saw it. He just illuminated, and he spoke up for it. You think Obama would have done that? He would have supported it. Because he was the same Obama that said, Trayvon Martin, he could be my son. Remember that? It rushed to justice, meddling, and in the business there. Well, Donald Trump, he stood up for military families and military veterans and military those who lost their lives in fire, fighting for this country. If you've ever stepped in Arlington Cemetery, and I've been there several times. I used to live in Alexandria, Virginia, before I lived here in Tampa Bay. And I got to tell you, folks, I get emotional just thinking about the cemetery of folks that's so young that didn't even get out, weren't able to live out the rest of their life, died so young. But the rows and rows and rows, thousands upon thousands of soldiers that bled and died for our country. Don't you think it's the least we can do? The least we can do is on Sunday, before a game, we stand and we remember why we have that flag and what that flag stood for them, even if we don't understand it. Go to Arlington Cemetery. Look at those graves. Spend some time there. Look at the names. And for those that don't have a name, when the president, he puts the wreath on the tombstone with the unnamed soldier, because they don't know who he is. There's so many that were unaccounted for. They don't know where they are. Missing in action, whatever. They never came home. The least we can do. The least we can do. And I well up with pride when I say the national anthem. It really drives me crazy when you see these players, when they make millions upon millions upon millions of dollars for playing, as they said, what movie that Adam Sandler was in? The Waterboy. That's the movie he was in, Foosball.